Welcome to the Communication Diva podcast, episode 65. Today's episode considers the subject of small talk. I remember an English instructor of mine in college who was a master of small talk. He would hold court at the pub with a table full of students and keep everyone talking for hours. He was really good at it. Yeah. Not all of us have that ability. Nope. Anyway, hey, would you please cue the music and put us all out of our misery? I'm dying here.
Welcome to Communication Diva. I'm Jen Swanson, and this is the podcast that helps you to deepen your relationships both at work and at home through improved communication skills. And sometimes I interview people about how they use communication in their lives and their work, and sometimes it's just me talking away to you here about different things and particular skills to do with communication. So here we are, and this is May, and this is episode 65, and my family and I just got back from Maui in Hawaii, and we had a fabulous time. There were 9 of us there, family and friends, my husband Scott and I and our 4 kids and some extra kids. But one of our kids, Ben, only made it there for about 48 hours. He was having great adventures as far as sleeping in through flights and all sorts of other things. He is finishing up second-year university and has been extremely busy working and performing and doing all sorts of things in the theater program that he's in. And I guess was just super tired, and they did not hear the alarm and missed the flight, and ended up getting rebooked the next day because he is off working in a mine for the summer. He had to leave early as well, so the poor kid ended up with about 48 hours of the 7 or 8 day family vacation. He ended up with about 48 hours. However, it was lovely to have him there, and what a wonderful place to visit is Hawaii and Maui in particular. And with the exception of me, I think no one else had ever been there in our group. So we ended up having wonderful adventures. And one of the reasons I'm telling you this is that we encountered a couple of particularly amazing communicators along the way. I don't have their last names, but I can tell you their first names and who they work for because I wanted to give a shout out to these 2 amazing people. The first one's name was Sarah, and she was the concierge at a place we stayed that is owned by Aston, the big hotel group, and it is called the Papakea Resort in Kanapali, Maui. And Sarah is the concierge there, or one of them, and she was absolutely phenomenal. Because of the changing in the schedule for our son and all the stuff that was going on, it ended up we had to shift things around at the last minute, and Sarah pulled strings and managed to make it all work so that we were able to do and have some of the adventures that we had, including Ben when he finally arrived. And she was just wonderful. She was friendly. She was informative. She bent over backwards to accommodate, and she was just a fantastic resource to ask questions of. And she always seemed to have time for us when we popped in to see her. So we left her with a nice bottle of wine and a thank you card signed by all of us at the end. And I really think that the people at Papakea are lucky to have Sarah as one of their employees. So she was a wonderful communicator. The other person that we were really impressed by, touched by, learned a lot from is a guy named Scott, and I think his last initial was M, but we don't have his last name, who works for Valley Isle Excursions. And this is a tour company that runs these little buses around the road to Hana. And if any of you have ever been to Maui, you will know that that is one scary driving road. They call it the divorce highway because a lot of people try and do it in rental cars, and it doesn't always go well. But we had this amazing tour guide named Scott, and the bus only held 12 people. There were 11 people on the bus. 9 of them were us, our family, and there was another couple that joined us. And this guy, Scott, talked nonstop, entertained us, played music, made us a picnic lunch. It was just an incredibly long 11 and a half hour fantastic day. And one of the 20-year-old boys who was with us said that, and this was his comment, and I think it's very funny. He said, I have never had somebody talk for 12 hours straight and not have me want to blow my brains out, which is really not a nice thing to say. But you know, he meant that that this guy talked constantly, but it was interesting, and we learned stuff all day, and it wasn't annoying, I think is his comment. So that was pretty funny. We thoroughly enjoyed our day, and learned so much. He taught us Hawaiian. He taught us stuff about the flora and the fauna and the medicinal properties of some of the plants. He played us songs. It was incredible. So he was an amazing communicator. So if you ever want to take the Road to Hana tour, that's the only tour, that's the only route he drives, ask for Scott at Valley Isle Excursions and tell him that Jen Swanson sent you, because that guy is amazing, and they are also lucky to have him on staff. So there you go. Someone I'm not impressed with, a company I'm not impressed with at the moment because of their dreadful communication is, and normally I don't say the name of companies I'm not impressed with, but I'm really not impressed with Allegiant Air right now. Their communication is in serious need of improvement. They don't have a toll-free number for customers to try and call. We were trying to cancel an airline flight for our son who had to go back earlier. There were no staff at the airport the day we went to cancel, and no signs, no phone numbers, no information about how to get a hold of them. We didn't have access to a computer, and finally managed to find one, and the return email address, the email kept bouncing back. The phone number that is not toll-free had a more than 20-minute wait any other day that I tried to call, and that particular day happened to be a Sunday, and there was nobody there. So it's very frustrating. I'm not really not impressed with the communication of that company, and I really hope that they will do something to improve, because until they do, the impression given is that while the prices may be extremely reasonable for flying, the customer service part of it is not really all that important. So that's the impression given. That may not be true, but that is what is being communicated by that company. So I really hope that they do something to change that, because so far I'm thoroughly unimpressed. And having spoken to a number of other people, I'm hearing the same thing back. So here's a little tip there, Allegiant. Get your act together as far as communication goes, because I think people might be reverting back to other more personable airlines in the future. Anyhow, enough of that. Let's talk about small talk. What is it? What's it for? And how can you practice small talk if this is a challenge for you? So here we go. Small talk is talking for the sake of talking and not much else. Sometimes it's used when people don't know each other at all or very well, or it can be used to fill an awkward moment if you're standing somewhere with strangers. Sometimes small talk is made in business settings between employees and customers, or between coworkers, or when people are waiting in line or in a queue for something. In Canada, the default small talk opener that all customer service people seem, like cashiers, servers, and such, seem to be trained to use is, "Hi, how are you today?" That seems to be the default where I live. And the expected small talk response is something like "fine, thanks," or "good, thanks." And it's become so boring. It's overdone, overused, and really doesn't mean anything anymore, because the person asking, "How are you today?" 9 times out of 10 actually doesn't expect an answer, or they just aren't listening. So they'll say, "Hi, how are you today?" And then they'll just carry on doing what it is they're doing. And it's like they're not even expecting any other response than "fine, thanks." That's it. So, of course, me being, again, the tongue-in-cheek communication diva, always tries to think of something different to say when asked that question. I really, unless I'm not feeling well or I'm annoyed or I'm in a hurry, I most of the time do not say "fine, thanks." If somebody says, "Hi, how are you today?" I will answer something like, "I'm hungry," or "I'm really tired," or "I'm freezing cold," or I'll say something different than "I'm fine, thanks." And then I watch the response, which is almost inevitably one of surprise, like I've just woken this person up out of their routine. And then I get a little bit of real small talk going, at least something that seems more interesting and not rote. And that's just something that I do just to play with it, because I really am tired of "How are you today?" and then nothing. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter really how I am today to this person. It's what they're supposed to say. And they say it routinely, regularly, like they're being watched and evaluated. And so for me, I like to just shake things up a little bit. So I always try to say something different. And some people are perfectly happy and fine with "fine, thanks." And if I'm not in a chatty mood, I will say that too. But again, often I would rather not. So there you go. British anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, I don't know if I've said his name right, studied small talk in 1923, and he named it something called phatic communication, PHATIC, which means that its only task or purpose is social. It has no other purpose. Now, small talk can be motivated by you wanting to make a connection with somebody, right? So if you're in a social setting, you see somebody you like, you see somebody in business that you would like to make a connection with, you could be motivated by more than just social interaction. But small talk itself is created for, the purpose of it is phatic communication, just social conversation. And many people find this skill challenging and anxiety provoking, and would rather hide out in the bathroom or play with their telephones or whatever, than to be in a situation where they have to interact with others that they don't know. And that can be if you are an introvert, if you are very shy, if you're not very self-confident. Those can be reasons why you find this social skill very challenging. Other people are very skilled at it. And like any social skill, it takes practice to make it sound and feel natural. So how do you practice so that small talk does feel and sound natural, and so that it doesn't provoke anxiety if you find yourself in a situation where you need to engage in it? There are a few topics that are considered to be safe to discuss when making small talk. There are probably more, but some of the most common ones are as follows. The weather. Okay, this is probably the top number one most common topic of small talk that exists is the weather, So it looks like it might snow tomorrow, or um, wow, it's really warm out today, or whatever. So the weather is probably one of the safest, easiest, most common, almost cliche small talk openers. Current events, current sporting events, current, world events, as long as they're not too political or whatever, might also be safe bets for small talk. We've got a hockey team here in Canada, the Canucks, and in Vancouver here. And right now, I think they've got one game left that will make or break whether or not they go to the playoffs. So, around here, it would be easy to say, so are you thinking the Canucks might actually make it this time? Might be a topic of small talk, a way to start. So current sporting events are pretty safe commonly. A common issue. So for example, how small and uncomfortable these airplane seats are. And can you believe they don't even recline? Would be an example. Or if you're waiting for something, you can talk about how long the wait is. Why haven't they got more cashiers on today? This is a really long wait. You would think maybe they would have some more people working here. That kind of thing. Or the setting you're in. What a gorgeous home this is. I wonder who did the decor. I wonder what the name of that paint color is. This is an absolutely beautiful house. That kind of thing if you're in a social setting. So there are a number of fairly safe topics. So the weather, sporting events, or a celebrity in town, something like that. A common issue about the setting, the situation you're in, how long the wait is, or something about the wait that you've got if you're waiting in line for something, or the setting you're in, where you are. This is amazing. That kind of thing. Some topics that are not considered acceptable for small talk would be controversial topics. So topics that are that people are passionate about on one side or another. Politics, religion, money or salary, how much you make, personal and private matters, relationship matters, that kind of thing. Anything that would make the other person obviously uncomfortable. These are not acceptable for small talk. So, walking up to complete strangers and disclosing your, complete personal business about what you did on your date last night would be not acceptable. So sometimes people have trouble with what's called self-disclosure, or knowing how much of themselves to reveal to acquaintances or to strangers. And this can make other people uncomfortable. If you're not sure whether or not you have an issue with self-disclosure, one of the ways you can pick up on whether or not maybe you need to work on that would be to pay close attention to the body language and the responses of the other person or people to know whether or not you're being too personal in your small talk. And so if you're really serious about being careful about this, pay attention to the reactions you're getting from the other person or people when you're making small talk to gauge whether or not what you're talking about is too personal. And I would say try sticking to the safe topics rather than talking about intimate personal details or controversial details as well. I ended up sitting beside a man on a bus once who told me his entire marital history. And by the end of the ride, I knew the names of all his children, his ex-wife, what the arrangements are for his custody, his new girlfriend's name. It was entirely inappropriate, but he didn't even seem to notice. He just wanted somebody to listen, and I pretty much was listening. So it was a very one-sided conversation, and most of the time I just said, oh, interesting. I didn't really even ask any questions because I didn't want to know all of this. I had never met this person before, was never going to meet them again. And I guess sometimes that feels safe to people, on airplanes or trains or public transit, is that they can divulge everything and anything to this stranger that they may never see again. So I guess that's what was going on. But it really was uncomfortable for me because I was embarrassed. I didn't really want to hear all of this, and I really just wanted to read my book. But this person wasn't listening to my body language, my responses, or anything, and was in his own little world, talking away. So that was, I'm sure many of you have experienced that at some time or another also. Culturally, one must be careful about small talk. I learned that in France, for example, asking what someone does for a living is actually a rude question. It's far better to ask what a person does for fun or for a hobby or what they're interested in than to ask what they do to earn a living. So in France, asking about the person themselves, who they are, is acceptable, but not what they do for a living. In North America, however, one of the first questions people ask when making small talk in a social setting is what you do for a living. And that's not considered rude at all in North America. So be mindful perhaps of the cultural setting you are in when making small talk, because sometimes there are cultural differences in what is acceptable to ask a stranger and what isn't. And it would be helpful if you know in advance that you're going into a situation with people from a different culture, that you do a little research in that area so you're not offending people or coming off as being rude. So how do you start? Well, for many people, a topic will just come naturally to mind, especially if you're waiting in line for something. Something like, it would be nice if they had entertainment for us while we waited, wouldn't it? Kind of like the Disney lineups. Or, you might ask, have you been waiting a long time? This line doesn't seem to be moving, that kind of thing. So the setting might provide you with a natural topic idea, depending on what situation you're in. If you want to talk about the weather, you might say something like, well, it looks like we brought the Maui weather home with us. What a gorgeous day. Or something like, I think we might all rust with the rain we've been having. That kind of thing. So something about that everyone has in common, and I think that's part of it. There's a commonality around the weather. We are all living together in whatever weather we happen to be going through right now. Did you hear the wind last night? I thought the trees were going to come down on my house, that kind of thing. So weather is, again, pretty much the first ultimate safe topic of conversation. If you encounter somebody holding a baby or somebody with a dog, it can be easy to focus on that by asking about the age of the dog or the child, or the name of the dog or the child, or something like that. And people seem to be drawn to babies of all species, and small talk often comes more easily when there is a third focus, because then you're not focusing on the other person, you're not focusing on yourself, you're focusing on this little person or little creature, and that can be sometimes a much more easy way to begin a conversation with somebody you don't know. Oh, what a cute puppy, right? That kind of thing. At a social event, you might compliment someone on an outfit they're wearing. I just love your sweater. Where did you get that? Or, something like that. Or on the food that they've brought, or the food that's being served. Or you might ask a person if they've tried this appetizer because it's delicious, or this is really nice wine, that kind of thing. You might also ask how the person knows the host or the hostess of the party. How do you know the people that are hosting this party? That's a good question. If you have any chance to do this at all, prepare in advance for the event. If you know you're going to a particular social event, do a little research, find out more about the people you will be mingling with, and then you can think up some good and relevant questions or topics that would be helpful to talk about. Maybe think up 2 or 3 questions or small talk openers that you could have, that you could use over and over again with different people as you meet them. For example, at the New Media Expo conference that I attended last January, there were lots and lots of opportunities for mingling. And the most common questions were things like, are you a blogger or a podcaster? Or what show do you produce? Or what's your focus? And it was because we all had a common reason for being there. So people were interested to hear not only what other people were doing, but to network. with them and to make some connections. Sometimes the questions were around technologies, such as what platform do you use for your blog? Or have you ever tried, this particular product? Or who hosts your podcast? That kind of thing. Where are you based out of? Where did you come from to come to this conference? So knowing the nature of the gathering can lead to really good small talk questions, and can be much easier to jump into a conversation with strangers if you've got something in common like that. So do some research if you are at all able to in advance of whatever social situation you're going into, and then perhaps you would be able to feel more comfortable making small talk. One of the things that I have a real challenge with is remembering names. So if you're worried about remembering names, and there are a lot of us out there who have this challenge, try using them frequently once you're introduced. I know that sometimes in business training, they say use the person's name 3 times successively, in sentences when you first meet them, and that will burn it into your brain. I try to relate the name of the person to maybe something they're wearing or their hair or some feature, So, okay, Kathy has long brown hair and a blue dress on, and Karen has black hair and glasses and a green dress on, or whatever. Name tags are brilliant, but they're not always available. And if this is an event that you're going to see these people for a couple of days and suddenly they're not wearing their name tag the next day, you can be in real trouble. And you know what? If I forget somebody's name, I just try to be honest and say, you know what? I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Can you tell it to me again? If you're not sure if you've met someone or not, you can say, I can't remember if we've met, or I'm, my name's Jen. I'm not sure if we've met or not, that kind of thing. You can ask them, or you can say, I don't think I've met you yet. My name is Jen, and introduce yourself. So names can be a challenge, and there are some good resources out there. I don't have them at my fingertips, but there are some good resources out there for getting better at learning people's names. And if any of you have any ideas, please come over to communicationdiva.com and let me know, let the rest of us know, if you have some good tips on remembering names. So the guidelines for small talk are just that. Keep it simple and safe topic-wise. And unless the conversation progresses into something that's in-depth and mutually interesting, one of the guidelines is to be brief. If you find something in common with the other person, you can get curious and ask them questions, but be careful not to belabor a topic or to get too personal with your line of questioning. People often don't mind answering open-ended questions, and in general like talking about themselves or about things they're interested in a general way. So it can be an easy way to break the ice and get started talking if you ask a question. But again, if the topic seems to cause the other person any kind of discomfort, change topics. And so a big part of small talk is about good listening, and not listening just to the words, but to the silent body language and facial cues. How are you going to know if you're causing somebody else discomfort if you're not paying any attention to them? So pay attention. Listening is key to good small talk, because you need to be watching for facial cues, watching for body language, and watching to see their level of interest, right? And this is the point of networking events, where you have to connect with people. You're always starting with small talk, right? Networking events, that's the whole point of them. You're starting with small talk, but it's really important for you to listen as well, because sometimes small talk, especially at these networking events, will lead to really excellent connections. So one thing is that if you ask a question, make sure you're really listening, right? So ask a question and then stop and actually pay attention and see what happens after that. It can be a lot easier to put everybody else at ease when you're going into a small talk situation if you look like you're relaxed and open to conversation, even if you don't feel it. So pay attention to your own body language. Keep your arms uncrossed. Sit and stand where you don't have your back to people. Smile, right? Even if you're not feeling this inside, fake it, right? And eventually other people will feel relaxed, and hopefully you will have some good conversation. So watch your own body language. One of the things to be careful of is where you're looking. If somebody's having a small talk conversation with you, I mean, sometimes these are boring conversations. But if you start looking around while someone is making small talk with you, you'll give the impression that you're hoping that someone might come and rescue you, or you're trying to get out of the situation. And this might be true, but you want to be careful because you might appear to be really rude. It might be that you're not trying to get out of the conversation at all. It might be that you're wondering where the appetizer tray is, where the person with the appetizer tray is that's going to be coming around because you're hungry. Or it might be that you're trying to see where your partner is in the room, or whatever. So it might be something like that. But if you're talking to somebody you don't know and you start looking around, you're going to come off as being rude and like you're trying to get out of the conversation. So just be aware of your own body language and what it is communicating when you're making small talk. One thing that is extremely annoying to me, and I'm sure to others, is when a person barges into a conversation that others are having and talks only about themselves. And I watched a woman do this repeatedly at a workshop I was at a while ago, and it got so that I was fascinated by how consistent she was in her ability to turn any and every situation into a topic about herself. It was uncanny. For example, she didn't have children of her own, but there were two people talking about their own children, and she walked into the conversation, didn't ask anything about anybody else, but started telling a story about her friend's child, a story that was completely unrelated to what the others were talking about. But she felt like she had to make this conversation that had nothing to do with her all about her. And because she had a big personality, the conversation that had been going on before she jumped in stopped completely, and people soon figured out a way in short order to exit the group. And she ended up standing there by herself. So be careful of making it all about you, because you're going to come off as being self-centered or worse if every conversation that you enter ends up being about yourself. Be curious and be interested in others. And of course, people will ask you questions and you can answer questions about yourself too, but be sure to balance the two. So if you're walking into an already going conversation, it's good to just start by listening. Just listen to what they're talking about. And if someone asks you a question, answer it. Or maybe you'll think up a question to ask one of the other people. But to walk in and launch into something all about yourself in the middle of someone else's conversation is really not going to be seen as a good thing. All right, and what about ending small talk? Have an exit strategy. As with pre-planning starter topics, it can be really helpful to pre-plan ways to end conversations too, particularly if you're in social or networking situations. So think up 2 or 3 ways to leave a conversation if necessary, or when you want to move on. It could be something as simple as saying, well, I only have a few more minutes and I need to finish reading this chapter before I get to work. This is if you're on the bus and you've got a book in your hand and someone next to you is talking to you. Or you can say something like, well, I'm hungry, so I'm going to check out the food at the buffet. It was lovely to meet you at a social gathering. You can talk about needs. I need to find my friend to find out what time she wants to leave, that kind of thing. If it's going to be a difficult getaway, you can, and this, set up a rescue signal with a friend or a spouse or somebody that came with you who can swoop in and ask you for something or save you if it's going to be a desperate situation. But otherwise, there are graceful ways to get out of small talk situations. It was lovely to talk to you. I'd really like to talk to you more sometime about the work that you're doing on that particular project. Right now, I need to find something to drink because it's really warm in here and I'm thirsty. That kind of thing would be a graceful way to leave the conversation. It was really nice talking to you, Mark. I will enjoy talking to you again sometime, but I've got to run. that kind of thing. So try and find graceful ways to exit. Small talk is a social skill, and it's a really, really good one to develop because inevitably you're going to find yourself at a wedding, at a funeral, at a work event, at a social gathering, at a networking session, traveling somewhere in the world or anywhere, standing in line at the store or the bank, where there will be somebody you don't know and where someone or you might start up a conversation. And rather than hiding head down in your handheld technology or, again, hiding in the bathroom, practicing will improve this skill. So practicing great listening, practicing curiosity and open-ended questions, practicing with the safe topics will help you to be much more at ease and comfortable with the art and the social skill of small talk. So there you go. Now I've talked for quite some time, haven't I? Anyway, I hope that this has been helpful and useful to you and that you will comment on what you've heard here today and add to it if there's anything else that you want to, or tell us a story. There is a SpeakPipe button on the website where you can leave an audio message, or you can come over to communicationdeva.com and leave a comment. In the comment section, you just click on the little thing that says number and comments at the bottom, and it will take you to where you can fill in a form and add your comment. You can find me on Twitter at JENN Swanson and the number 2, or you can find me on Facebook at the Communication Diva page. So lots of ways to communicate, and I hope that you are having a wonderful day. Thank you for taking the time to spend some time here with me, and I hope that you continue listening to Communication Diva. Until next time, happy small talk. This is Jen. Bye.